Once upon a time, in the dusty heart of the Wild West, an auction began. Half price for a quiet Apache girl, yet no one dared to bid. Until one cowboy changed everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. The dust rolled over the flatlands as the sun leaned low, spreading long shadows across the dry earth. The year was somewhere near 1878, a time when the war between settlers and the Apache had cooled into uneasy silence. The frontier towns were half-built and half-broken, standing like bones in the desert. On that day, the air around Fort Bowie was heavy, not with gunpowder or thunder, but with something quieter and crueler. People had gathered for an auction, their boots kicking up dust as if to bury what they were about to do. The trader's yard smelled of sweat, horses, and gun oil. Soldiers lounged near the wagons, pretending not to care, but their eyes said otherwise. These auctions always drew a crowd. Some came to buy laborers, others came just to watch the spectacle. On the makeshift platform stood a small group of captives, men, women, and children, taken from scattered camps in the hills. Their wrists were bound with rope, their faces blank as stone. The officer in charge barked orders to keep them lined up. Behind him, the trader grinned like a man counting coins before they even touched his hand. Among the captives stood a girl no older than 19. She was smaller than the others, her head bowed, her long dark hair tangled by the wind. Her dress was torn, borrowed from some settler woman. It didn't fit her right, hanging loose at the shoulders. But there was something about her, something quiet, still, and steady. Her eyes, when they lifted for a moment, were black pools of calm that made even the noise of the crowd feel distant. No one knew her name. The trader called her Lot 7. The first man to bid that afternoon was a rancher from down south. He wanted strong hands to mend fences and haul water. The bids went fast. $40 for a young man, $60 for a woman who could sew, $75 for a boy who could ride. Each sale ended with a nod and a coin exchange, the crowd muttering with half-interest. Then the trader motioned toward the quiet girl, his voice rising. Next, Lot 7. She's a good worker, quiet, obedient, strong as she looks. Starting at 50. But the crowd didn't move. Silence spread wider than the desert. The trader frowned and repeated himself. $50. No hands went up. He dropped the price to $40. Still nothing. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Someone in the back laughed. The kind of laugh that cuts deep because it's true. Ain't no one want an Apache girl, he said. They bite. Another voice joined in, rough and careless. Not worth the trouble. They'll slit your throat soon as you sleep. The trader cursed under his breath and slammed his hand against the table. $30! He shouted. The crowd stayed still. The girl didn't move either, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond them all. Finally, the trader said, half price. $25! His voice cracked with frustration. Still, no one answered. The moment stretched until even the wind seemed to stop. And then, just when the trader was about to wave her off as unsellable, a voice came from the edge of the crowd. I'll take her. It wasn't loud, but it carried. The crowd turned to look. The speaker was a man in a dust-stained coat, his hat pulled low. He wasn't from town, that much was clear. A stranger, tall and sun-browned, with a quiet drawl and eyes that had seen too much. He stepped forward, dropped a small pouch of coins on the table, and nodded once. $25, he said. Seems fair. The trader blinked, half relieved, half amused. She's yours then, cowboy. He spat into the dirt and scribbled something on a slip of paper. Take her and go. You just bought yourself a heap of trouble. The stranger said nothing. He looked at the girl only once, his expression unreadable. Then he cut the rope from her wrists with a pocket knife and handed her a canteen. You can walk? He asked. She didn't answer, but she nodded. Together, they left the yard, the murmurs of the crowd following like a trail of dust behind them. They walked in silence down the empty road. The sun was sinking lower, and the desert turned red like cooling iron. The girl kept her eyes forward, her steps measured. The man's horse followed behind them, saddlebags heavy with supplies. After a while he spoke again, more to the horizon than to her. "Name's Caleb," he said. "You got one?" She hesitated, as if unsure whether he truly wanted to know. Then, in a voice barely louder than the wind, she said, "Tayan." It meant new moon in her tongue. He nodded once. "Tayan, then." They camped by a dry creek bed that night. Caleb built a small fire, keeping it low so it wouldn't draw attention. Tayan sat on the opposite side, her knees pulled close. She hadn't eaten all day. He slid a piece of hardtack toward her, then some dried beef. "Ain't much," he said. She hesitated before taking it. Her fingers were thin, her wrists bruised from the rope. She chewed slowly, her gaze fixed on the flames. He watched her, trying to read something in her silence. Most captives cried or cursed or begged. She did none of that. It was as if she had already buried every feeling deep enough that no one could reach it. Later that night, as the fire crackled low, Caleb lay on his side, his hat tipped over his eyes. But he wasn't sleeping. He could hear her breathing, slow even, careful. The desert wind whispered through the brush, carrying the sound of coyotes in the distance. He thought of how easy it would be for her to slip away in the dark. But she didn't. Maybe because she was too tired. Maybe because she didn't yet believe she was free to try. Or maybe, just maybe, she had already decided that wherever she went, trouble would follow anyway. By morning, they were back on the trail. The sky was pale blue, streaked with the last threads of dawn. Caleb's ranch was 3 days' ride northwest, near the edge of the mountains. He had built it himself after leaving the army. 10 acres of stubborn land and a small wooden house that leaned a little to the east. It wasn't much, but it was his. As they rode, he noticed how she moved. Silent, sure-footed, never wasting emotion. When they stopped for water, she refilled his canteen before her own. He didn't comment, but he saw it. There was a strength in her quiet that unsettled him. That afternoon, they passed an old homestead burned to the ground. The wind carried the smell of ash, even though the fire had long died. Tayan slowed, her eyes fixed on the ruins. "My people lived in houses like that once," she said softly. It was the first time she spoke without being asked. Caleb looked at her, then at the blackened wood. "Yeah," he said. "Mine too." They didn't say more after that, but something in the air shifted. A small thread of understanding woven between them. When they reached his ranch, the sun was setting again. The fence needed mending, and the barn roof sagged, but it was quiet there, far from the noise of town. Caleb showed her the pump, the shed, and the small bunkhouse out back. "You can sleep here," he said. "Ain't fancy, but it's dry." She stepped inside, looking around at the rough boards, the narrow bed, the single window that opened to the hills. For the first time since the auction, her shoulders eased just a little. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "You work the way you like. No one here's gonna shout at you." Over the next few days, the rhythm of their lives settled like dust after rain. Tayan rose before sunrise, fetched water, fed the horses, and moved through her chores without a sound. Caleb worked alongside her, mending fences and tending the small herd that grazed near the creek. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them was different now. Less like a wall, more like a quiet agreement. He noticed how she always faced the wind when she stopped to rest, as if listening for something only she could hear. Once he asked, "You ever plan to go back to your people?" She looked up, her dark eyes steady. "There is no back," she said. That night he found himself thinking about her long after the fire had burned down. The desert had a way of keeping secrets, but something told him this one wouldn't stay buried. Tayan wasn't just another captive trying to survive. There was a purpose in her stillness, something waiting behind her eyes. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it would come. like the monsoon that always arrived too late but hit too hard. He poured another cup of coffee and watched the stars until the sky turned gray. The next morning brought riders, 2 soldiers from the fort. Their uniforms were dusty, their faces tired. Caleb saw them before they reached the gate and felt his jaw tighten. The taller one tipped his hat. "Morning, we're looking for an escaped prisoner. Apache girl, taken from the auction yard 2 days ago." Caleb's pulse slowed. "Escaped?" he asked evenly. "Thought she was sold." The soldier shrugged. "Trader says the paperwork never went through. Captain wants her back." His partner spat in the dirt. "Best if folks don't meddle in government business, cowboy." Caleb crossed his arms. "Ain't meddling. Haven't seen anyone matching that." The soldiers exchanged looks, then turned their horses around. "If you do," the tall one said, "best tell us quick. Wouldn't want trouble riding your way." They rode off in a trail of dust. Caleb watched them disappear, then turned toward the barn. Tayan stood inside the doorway, her eyes wide, her hands clenched tight. He met